allegedly, apparently, the streets are saying all the baddies, all the masala spices, all the fine babes are boycotting. They are resisting. They are actively using their pretty little mouths to stand up against systems of oppression and the colonizers. And they're really taking all that fine, spicy, schmexy energy to protect the victims of genocide. So I can only imagine by the time you got to this video, and if you happen to found this, you must be an ally, and you will also be contributing to dismantling the systems of colonization and oppression. And if that is not the case, I just want you to know
this whole video is infused with a mantra, like an old ass Hindu ancient curse type of thing that will make your hairline recede, your pores bam, your bank account shrunk. Several generations ahead of you will have nothing but a horrible human twister and never be able to achieve the big O again. Should we talk about
how Rahu and Mars is making sure the structures quiver because what? The youth deliver. Let's talk about the revolution. Look, if you've been following me for a long enough time, you are aware that we are in the downfall of colonialism. There are upcoming transits that are going to impact our societies for many decades to come. May is a particularly spicy month because what it indicates in these cycles is the rebellion that is necessary, is for the voices to stand up against the oppressor. And the one thing I want to emphasize, and I said this in my Saturn video, so please go and check it out. In moments like this, where we find ourselves surrounded by a lot of chaos, very aware of different injustices and harms that other people are going through, astrology is not always the case, or we're getting paid out. Sometimes in moments, we are being heavily judged for our actions that we chose in that moment. And like I said in the Saturn video, sometimes we can be stupid enough to think our actions don't mean anything, but our behaviors, our conversations, our intentions, the things that we choose to do with our free will can impact not just our loved ones, but several generations ahead. And I think when we look at this Rahu and Mars, I honestly hope you all really understand the people who are protesting, those children in different college campuses and universities around the world are not criminals. They are using their free will as they should do. And you should be more alarmed about grown-ass adults who want to harm them. And why should it take babies to speak up? How crappy are we that the most vulnerable people in our society who have the least amount of rights, everything is much scarier than them, should be put in that position? And what's happening to them? They're being beaten up, they're being muzzled. Pay attention, hibiscuses. All this violence and conflict is not purposeless. It's trying to make you aware and make you switch on as to what the real problems are. And if we keep heading the way that we are, we can only have ourselves to blame. If you don't use your voice, don't speak up when everything is said and done. Like, I can't believe this is what we've ended up with. Did you oppose it? Did you stand up? So with that, slide number 1, baby. So I labeled this slide, chain makers, rule breakers are birthed. Again, those babies on the campuses, standing on big business. So I said on this slide, Mars represents youth, aggression, coups, and strong determination. Rahu represents things being provoked to create radical change, deception, and destiny. Let's unpack that. The resistance we are seeing is a part of a destined time, right? Rahu also represents a false sense of authority and a false sense of power structures. One of the things that the Rahu and Mars conjunction is going to do is going to make you acutely aware that the things that we value or we think are almighty and powerful only have that influence because we give it to them. They are not innately powerful. We literally have to be oppressed, brainwashed, put into such a deep state of ignorance and fear for them to function. Why, again, I really just want you to reflect on, why do you think a bunch of babies who live off a diet, or we'll say at best Cocoa Pops, a couple of dosas, fizzy pop, Coca-Cola, are so scary to grown adults who have access to a military? What is scary about those babies? It's because they're not doing what? They're not buying into the propaganda. They're seeing things for how they are. They are actively educating. Oppression can only work if you remain ignorant. But as soon as you start to switch on, that's why Mars represents power coups, right? It's this idea when the warrior awakes, it's not playing into the dynamic anymore. It finds the energy and vigor to go, I'm not bothered if I win or lose this fight, but I'm going to make sure you stop. You must remember, last month we were talking about what? Mars and Saturn being conjunct. It talks about the warrior waking up. Great. In this month, the warrior fuses with Rahu, creating that radical change, disturbing things. The warrior is full of purpose. It's not mindless aggression. Use this energy properly, hibiscuses. And the one thing I want to emphasize, and I outline it on this slide, is a lot of freedom fighters, especially people who contributed to the liberation of their countries from different colonial empires, they actually all had Rahu and Mars conjunction. Don't you find it really interesting? In these times, such an astrological transit would occur. And when we go through this video, look, we're going to look at both sides, because when Rahu and Mars come together, and people don't talk about this enough in astrology, and it's one thing as you get to know me, and hopefully I teach you something and put you onto something good, you've got to remember, not everyone can handle the energy in the same way. We all have different karmas, there's so much going on, but free will is vital. When you have Rahu and Mars, a lot of like problematic pundits will try and scare people and be like, oh, you're malefic, you're going to be evil. Absolutely not. All it means is the soul has a huge sense of passion and purpose. And alongside that sense of destiny, a lot of energy. So the individual has to be nurtured and cared for in such a way that it can use that energy for good. Hence, freedom fighters and tyrants alike both have Rahu and Mars conjunction. So just think about that. And as always, make sure you're on the right side of history, because I'm telling you, there's only one end goal that's going to come up, and you don't want to be embarrassed talking about you are helping the oppressors and we're the oppressors now, without influence, without economics, without standing. But the key thing I would say is, when we look at this transit, it can take the most meekest, scared individuals and give them that oomph, give them that spice. So in May, on a personal front, right, in your individual lives, because again, we know March and April were horrible, right? This is no longer about you feeling sad, right? This is no longer about you feeling embarrassed or anything like that, or even being apologetic. This is you being like, cool, I understand the cards I was dealt, but now watch me. Rahu and Mars is nothing to fear. Yeah, there's going to be funky energy at collective level, but like I always say, destruction and creation are one and the same. Don't be scared. You have that energy in you. You're having these ideas in you for a reason. Just make sure you use them for a good purpose. And one thing I always say to people is God will always protect you when you are doing the right thing. Even if it feels scary, even if it feels uncomfortable and it takes you to a new place, a new mindset, you'll be fine. But you just got to have that oomph to get there. Speaking of oomph, let's explore what nakshatras Rahu and Mars are meeting up in. So, I want to go through, well, what does this look like in Pisces nakshatras? So I find it so funny because in Starbucks spirituality, they think Pisces are like these like really fluffy, emotional people. And I'm like, excuse me, can I give you two of my favorite examples of Ravati? Rihanna and Cardi B. Does that look like someone you can walk over? Does that look like someone that doesn't know themselves? Does that look like someone who's scared of using their own voice? I'm telling you, May is just that girl in terms of like astrological transits. I love it. I actually do. So let's start with this slide, right? The first thing I said was Purva Bhadra discusses victory after the most heartbreaking sorrows. It focused on sacrificing a lot of nonsense in the name to committing a higher purpose. Let's break that down, right? Again, if you reflect on the months just gone, there's a lot of sense of feeling like a lost soul, can't believe I've been betrayed, A, B, and C, and wising up to a lot of different corruption, right? The illusion is breaking now. This talks about you not just laying dormant or passive. It talks about you realizing, okay, I may have to give up a couple of luxuries or a certain mindset, but I know something's better on the horizon. I just have to kind of rise to the occasion. I have to use my energy and my free will to do better. Because, can I say one thing? One thing I've noticed in the aftermath of the last 2 months of the transits is a lot of the stuff that happened to people, they knew deep down it was coming. And it was just like this idea of turning a blind eye or trying to romanticize certain people and the certain realities. And then when it hit, because it would be inevitable, corruption is corruption, evil is evil, greed is greed. It will only ever have one outcome. When the inevitable happened, people are like, but it's like, okay, but get back up, you know? And Purva Bhadra, a lot of these individuals are known as like the master of their craft, and they're really devoted. So there's something in the personal journeys you're going through, the things that you feel passionate about achieving, standing on, whatever like your ethics, your moral, your causes, there's a deep devotion being built to that thing. So again, it's a beautiful time to eradicate any sense of like being overly apologetic, embarrassed, whatever. Like, no, you're good. You'll be walking into a sense of self. Again, you must remember the Pisces nakshatras deal with the rites of a funeral. This is when the soul is acutely aware it's going to leave this life. It has one more good rodeo, or it has to sit with the decisions it's made and basically take it on the chin about the life it's going to be reincarnated into. Keep telling you, the downfall of colonialism, that things are not going to be thanging like the way they were. And also to the idea of committing to a higher purpose. We don't have to beat around the bush. What a mad time to be alive. My 2 examples were going to be obviously the genocide of Palestinians, but the second thing was going to be about
Kendrick and Drake. Be the Drizzy, so catchy.
But I was thinking about this through 2 lenses. Let's deal with the serious first. Number 1, when we are so actively disgusted with the exploitation and eradication of Palestinian people, we are not just there to witness their suffering. What do we need to do to stop them being harmed? But again, the Palestinians are not the only people going through exploitation. You have Sudan, you have Congo, you have different communities. There's so much hibiscuses. But if there is something in our daily lives that contributes to these groups being in the position they are, we have to be serious with ourselves. What do we need to commit to make a difference? Also in your personal lives, I'm acutely aware you have your own ambitions and dreams. Like, what are you on? You can't get new things by doing the old stuff and having that mindset. What do you need to commit to make that highest purpose really be your reality? You know, this takes me to the next one. Uttara Bhadra. So Uttara Bhadra is basically Pisces type 2 to 5. Uttara Bhadra outlines someone who becomes incredibly knowledgeable about handling life's more poisonous aspects. And it's the divine architect. It's laying the seeds for the future. It represents the story of a Devata who basically created a million Rudras to protect mankind. Go and check out that Saturn video. Yeah, this Rahu and Mars conjunction at collective level is super scary. It denotes like a lot of intense behaviours and a lot of intense things playing out. But Uttara Bhadra also talks about the soul basically has like a life-altering experience that shocks it out of a state of being passive and not taking action. All this energy you're feeling in May is for a reason. Just make sure you are using that energy for the right reason. And one thing I always say to people is, look, the downfall of colonialism will guarantee the following. Yeah, they're going to be insane. They're going to get more crazy. But the only reason they're doing that is because it's the first time. And it's like, just imagine if you knew you losing was inevitable. You would never have the same influence again. No one would look at you the same. You don't think you're going to go in all guns a-blazing or put on your best fight. But in the same way, I always tell people, once you have a knowledge, you can never lose that knowledge. Even when your soul gets reincarnated, this is why we talk about past life gifts coming back to you. It's done. But now you know everything that you do. The way that you are learning more and more about how different oppression is upheld, you're learning the reality of things. Use that knowledge and use it to do good. Rahu and Mars represents a power struggle, but it also represents the best warrior, the best athletes, the people who have endurance to take on such a task. Get real serious. Like, don't. The thing is, when I look at things, especially like with particularly potent transits, it's really the case of the person's discipline that will make or break the outcomes. Because Rahu and Mars in a weak person is the following. They get super argumentative, they're super like they can't take that heat and they just break, or they act insane and they embarrass themselves. But Rahu and Mars in someone who's disciplined, has a purpose, has a strong set of ethics, it makes them such a refined warrior. It makes them very strategic. It makes them very calm in the face of adversity. And it's just like, I think also what makes them like some of the best warriors is their ability to influence and arouse passion in other people. Come on now. And then finally, Rahu and Mars will meet in Ravati. So that's Pisces type 6 to 9. Ravati is a protector of what's sacred. Ravati in Mars talks about someone who will protect the Vedas. Sacred knowledge, huh? I think a few things. We are also, because I talk a lot about the downfall of colonialism and how it's here, there are a lot of interesting conversations happening right now about communities really getting quite serious and stern about stopping the exploitation of their culture, right? So whether we think about Vedic astrology and all the star-but spirituality who now want to claim they're Vedic astrologers, whether we think about, those horrible yoga teachers, right, that literally make yoga like some sort of sexy exercise and they body shame and they completely remove the fact that it's a religious exercise. Whether we think about how people will appreciate Asian fashion, but only when it's by Western designers. When it's like, guys, you're just wearing a lehenga, like what the hell? There's elements of that. Again, just because I'm really invested in BBL Drizzy's downfall, think about Kendrick's bars. Kendrick's calling him out. He's like, it's so interesting that you are a Jewish middle class kid from Canada, but yet you want to appropriate the African American experience. You want to act like you're Black British Riz. It's that kind of energy. So it's about protecting the right things and making sure they're not exploited for the wrong things. I'm telling y'all, beautiful time. Ravati also talks about this feeling of being let down by society, right? So if I take you back to the examples of like Cardi B and Rihanna, they actively have a lot of conversations in interviews, and I suppose through their art too, about like exploring how society is misogynistic. Both of them have different lineages, but talking about kind of like, even though they come from certain heritages, how those heritages are perceived. And also they do a lot to raise awareness about like voting, financial safety, economics. So it's like, it makes people vocal about calling stuff out. None of that is bad. Use your voices wisely, hibiscuses. And also Ravati talks about the end of a journey and picking an unconventional path ahead. Basically, the unconventional path is not being down with colonialism anymore or any of its influence. I am happy to go on the path of unconventionality. Let's go. And I think also, all jokes aside, when you talk about Rahu and Mars going through the 9 types of Pisces, all 9 types of Pisces deal with a journey of basically undoing dangerous ideologies. And I just find it really interesting about the conversations we're seeing around different policies around different countries. I find it really interesting how we're having a rebellion of many generations against things that we have upheld and normalized for literally longer than most of us have been alive. And I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at it. It is just time to wake up. It's time to do a better thing. And yeah, there will be conflict, obviously, because you've got to remember, I talk about this a lot. Colonialism is just a financial venture. It's not about gold or glory. But the thing that makes colonialism stand up against, the impact of time is it creates such ideologies that it seeps into our day-to-day. But if you learn that everything that we've normalized or we think is like pretty and of value is just something created by colonialism to keep us oppressed, to keep us not liking ourselves, to keep us in a state of poverty, how do you feel about those ideologies? Rahu and Mars, the warrior goes no more with Sun out here. What to do with this energy? So, really easy. Number 1, fantastic time for innovation, taking a new approach. Whether that's in your personal life, your political life, whatever. Wake up, do things differently, let's get disruptive. Only good things come from disruption. There's nothing worth upholding right now. Number 2, obviously be mindful of your beliefs. So I obviously do these videos a little bit biased because I just assume, because it tends to be my community, we're all on the same page. But generally, right, let's get really specific. So I think the issue with a lot of like political movements is we very quickly turn into us versus them. Intersectionality, hunnins. So for instance, let's talk about, actually, yeah, let's go back to the genocide of Palestinians, right? Isn't it interesting how people will talk about, like, oh my God, they're killing so many children, the women A, B, and C, but they don't talk about the men. They don't talk about the elderly. They don't talk about the disabled. They don't talk about, like, pregnant women and stuff like that. It's this idea of, like, how to put it? All groups should be seen in a human light, and they're all deserving, right? And I also think it deals with this idea of like correcting an imbalanced view in us. So for instance, like again, feminism, right? As we all know, white feminism sucks ass. Like, you cannot say you are feminist when your feminism only basically helps white women, and you fail to understand the trials and tribulations of what brown women go through. You don't understand like how black women do not benefit from any kind of modern day again, if your feminism excludes women that comes from different religions, just because you're feminist doesn't mean that you have the correct mindset. There is intersections we must acknowledge, and when we make something more inclusive and it can benefit all different groups, then we're onto the right stuff. If we're doing stuff and it only benefits select community, something's wrong. We haven't got that. That's not the magic sauce or the masala we want. We've got to go back to the kitchen and cook up something different. Also, Rahu and Mars together, if the person's unbalanced, it can form an extreme amount of negativity. So again, Rahu and Mars, a lot of fucking energy, right? A lot of if it's in a weak individual, what will it make them? It makes them like abuse their power. It makes them think like they deserve everything, but they've done nothing. And sometimes it can create morals in them where like they can justify doing insane things, but literally for the good. And it's like, excuse me? You have literally violated human rights. You have muzzled the children in the country. You're doing weird media blackouts. And yeah, I don't really think we're on the path of justice. Have you ever heard that phrase? The path to hell is paved with good intentions. It's that energy. And also, one thing I want to emphasize is this phrase, sorry, the ADHD guys, this phase could also cause certain outbursts that ruin people's reputations, and like it will have long-term consequences. Again, BBL Drizzy taking on Kendrick, the boy, the man, Mr. Lamar. Watch him out. Don't really have a strong sense of self-awareness. This is not the time for pity parties. This is not the time to be a brat and think you deserve everything. Like, know yourself and keep yourself in check. I'm telling you, wait till you see the sun horoscope video. That is so shady of me, but like May is basically revealing to everybody like their true strength, their true power, and their true ethics and morals. I don't think a lot of people are going to be happy, but whatever. Sometimes God has to show you, BBL ethics, if you will. And then I think thirdly, keep an open mind to fresh concepts. It's really important, going back to my earlier point, to be open to different people, to foster a sense of community, and basically just be like very open to like impromptu things. Because where we are in this phase of like social reform, picking new paths and all of that, that's naturally going to connect us to people that maybe we haven't connected to before. It's going to introduce us to so much newness. Don't be scared. Don't be intimidated. Don't be resistant. Like, come together, make it happen, mingle, That's why they want to ban TikTok. They're literally, do you understand? I was thinking about this the other day. TikTok literally does so much good to show people you have so much more in common with the other than you think you don't, and that's what's so scary for them, because it's literally eradicating the ignorance and the division. About data, please. Finally, I wanted to take you through some real life examples. So, as I've discussed, Rahu and Mars comes together it creates a formidable force that can take on all kinds of evils. And it can take the most like scared, meekest person and literally bless them with such an energy to think they are capable enough to go towards their kind of goals and ambitions and not be scared of rejection. So if we take it back to like a personal level, one thing I found in readings, and oh my God, it's kind of one of my biggest pet peeves, is I hate people who like, I don't know, they want to go towards a certain goal, but they take no risk. There's just like a something in them where they're like, I don't get why A, B, and C is not happening for me, but they lack action and they lack like that certain mindset to make it happen. Rahu and Mars will fix all of that in you, baby. All of that. But the issue is because Rahu and Mars have such energy, such power, alongside that, it will test people's ethics, because Rahu and Mars puts a certain energy that if it's in, we'll say, a personal horoscope, yeah, you're destined for a certain level of oomph, but do you uphold your ethics and your value, and what does your oomph contribute towards? And with that, let's talk about real life examples. I use Mr. Rishi Sunak and Barack Obama because, yeah, these two men have Rahu and Mars conjunction, and I think they are the perfect example of everything I've been trying to discuss with you all. So, listen, when Rahu and Mars conjoin together, it talks about a path towards power. Inevitably, both of those men have walked it. But think about how they have chosen to walk it. So let's start with Mr. Sunak, the Prime Minister of the UK, right? If anyone's new around here, is not really up to date with politics, let me inform you about Mr. Sunak. Number one, he was never elected by British citizens to be the Prime Minister. He was implemented by his own party. There was no democratic vote. Number two, he is pretty much spearheading the UK being involved and enabling the genocide of Palestinians. But on that note, did you know the following? Mr. Sunak's family have over £500 million invested in Israel. That's right, they make a profit from Israel. And guess what their profits come from? Innovations and military surveillance. Also, on that note, did you know India currently has a lot of military contracts with the US for, we'll say, innovating its military devices and all of that kind of shebang? Did you also know India's a huge contributor to Israel, and it gives them a plethora of material and devices to do what Israel needs to do? Think about who Mr. Rishi Sunak's in-laws are. Think about certain circles and connections. So when we put stuff together, do we think the following is possible? Perhaps Mr. Sunak is refusing to hold a general election, which would usually be held in this month. He's the first Prime Minister to deviate from it. And legally, he cannot hold an election until January 2025. Do we think there is any chance that Mr. Sunak does not care about the British people, but instead will make huge decisions to look after his financial interest, even though the British people have very vocally protested against the genocide of Palestinians? We do not want our money to enable the harm of these people. Why do we think Mr. Sunak would keep doing what he does? Why do you think he would continue to implement policies both nationally and internationally that harm marginalised people? Do we think Rahu and Mars here is being used properly? Remember what I said, Rahu and Mars can create freedom fighters and tyrants. Now let's go over to the ethical side, right? I'm going to be honest, I really like the Obamas in terms of like representation, and I think like the pot piece thing, right? I totally bought into it. And if you don't know, I think Barack Obama is, again, a very interesting person. Like read his biography, even his wife, like they both, this is the thing, Rahu and Mars require someone to keep their ethics and values. And what I'm trying to get is, when Barack was younger, and he's openly, there's like so much content and materials around him being pro-Palestinian. And he, like literally like in his younger years, the biggest community organizer, the like grassroots, this is all intensive, not a bad person at his core. But I think, like everything, that journey into politics can change a person, perhaps may ask them to compromise aspects of their ethics and values. So yeah, at some point, Mr. Obama was a champion of Palestinian rights. And then during his presidency, he is, I believe, the US president to drop the most bombs and destruction on the Middle East. So there has to be conversations around, if we portray ourselves to have A, B, and C ethics and value, when we actually are given that authority and that power that we've been working for, and to a certain extent God was always going to put in our hands, did we uphold them? Was it worth it? That's Rahu and Mars. And that's what I'm trying to emphasize. When we look at Rahu and Mars and we think about the other transits going on, this is not just like mindless power struggles and conflict. This is a case where, like, one, I think a lot of people will feel empowered and energized to do what they need to do, both in their personal lives and things that they care about. But a lot of things are going to be revealed to us about certain authority figures. And if you can only have power and influence by lying about your ethics, by forcing your power even though you didn't earn it, and like all that kind of corruption, you're not a freedom fighter. You're not the person we're seeking. And why should we trust you to look after us and look after people? In May, you are going to wise up a lot. And so much is going to be revealed to you, but you shouldn't feel disheartened. Sometimes, I always personally think God reveals stuff to us when he knows we have a better mindset, or we're more adequate at dealing with that information and picking the right choice. And if you're angry and you're upset and you're distressed, yeah, you should be. We are all being like muzzled. We are all being forced into things that we don't agree with. And it's so weird how we are being forced to act like nothing is going on when literally so much harm is being perpetuated. Rahu and Mars, baby. That was your horoscope. Enjoy. Bye.